It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Green, gardening, and environment radio, flavored with a dash of humor. Welcome to intelligent, irreverent talk about plants and the planet they grow on. Your questions, comments, and participation are always welcome on Facebook and Instagram at The Mike Nowak Show and at Mike Now on Twitter.
Good planets are hard to find. Temperate zones and tropic climes. And true currents and thriving seas. Wind blowing through breathing trees. Strong ozone and safe sunshine. Well, good planets are hard to find. Good planets are in the man.
Brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com.
Jet streams, perfect air.
And here they are, Peggy Malecki and Mike Nowak.
Well, good planets are in the man. Right.
And there we are, and running, and I was just thinking about this as we were going into the show this morning, that for the last 2 months, basically, you don't want to take my blood pressure about 9 a.m. You just do not want to do that. But I'll tell you something, I'm very excited this morning for those of you watching us on our stream. We've added yet more new software. Oh boy!
You need a screen grab of what I'm looking at right now. It's pretty crazy.
Are you looking at the chat room?
Let's see. I got Restream chat up. I've got a separate chat up with Kayla. I've got 2 Facebook images up on 2 different browsers and my email.
It's the wave of the future. This is what we do now. But I'll tell you, we just added some new technology here so what the best part of it is I'm looking at the chat room, and we just added Restream to all of the other. For those of you who are interested in the technical aspect of this, we've been doing vMix for the last 2 months, which we're still doing because we love the platform and it allows me to do all these bells and whistles. And, some of you are listening to a podcast and it's just audio, but, you got to catch the live stream someday on Facebook, or we're on Twitter this week. We're back on Periscope on Twitter. We're on YouTube. And the best thing is there's this new chat function, which grabs all of the chat and all of the platforms and brings it onto one screen, which is just amazing, isn't it, Peggy? I'm looking at it this morning, and we got Zan is
Bruce
there.
Out there, Mo, Kathleen just joined us.
Bruce is there. And they're all watching, and we appreciate that. And tell your friends. Tell them they should be grabbing the stream and watching the show, because we've got a really, really excellent program for you this morning. We have back on the show a good friend. In fact, why don't we just bring him up there in the low... Uh-oh.
Caught him stretching.
Sorry about that, dude. That is Allan Armitage, and he is, as I said, he's been on the show many times. He's renowned horticulturist, writer, speaker, researcher, written a ton of books. He's written 4,700 books. I don't know if you realize this, but the latest...
And revised?
And revised books, and here we are. I'm holding up the latest here, and what I've been meaning to do, I'm going to put the bells out of the way so that I can just go and throw the book down.
It's part of my morning exercise program.
That's right. All right. It's like, but this is what you guys should be getting. Here's what you need to know. This is going to be the perfect holiday gift for just about anybody, including yourself. Herbaceous Perennial Plants, 4th edition. It clocks in at about 1,087 pages. That's with indices and everything else in there.
And photos, beautiful photos.
And it may be the only perennial book you ever need. Although I could recommend a couple of others. But Allan, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show. And congratulations, because the last time you were here with us, which, believe it or not, was Easter Sunday of this year. Yeah, I know. I went back and I had to look at that and go, wait a second, really? We had him on Easter Sunday? I can't believe you did it on Easter Sunday. And you joined us. And at the time, the world was really a scary place. You know what? It's still a scary place. And right now, as we all know, because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the numbers just going up in a scary fashion, it is also scary as we go. But at that time, you didn't know, we didn't know whether the horticultural industry was going to survive the year. And as it turns out, it did in spades. People took up gardening. A couple of weeks ago, we had Chris Beatties from Grower Talks on the program. And I'm sure you know Chris. And he was saying that some indications are that the world, well, America gained some 16 to 20 million gardeners during the pandemic this year. So you were afraid that gardening, in fact, in your book, in the foreword, in the preface, you talk about, is gardening dying? Well, you didn't have to worry about that, Allan. Things have changed dramatically this year, haven't they?
Well, good morning, Peggy and Mike and everybody else. I'm happy to be here, but you know, this is really interesting. I did say, I have asked many times, is gardening dying? But I also then add the fact that I don't believe it is. I never have believed it is. The fact that my daughters only took up garden when they had a place to garden is pretty common. And the fact that this whole COVID thing, you know, you say it was a scary place in Easter Sunday. It's scarier today.
Yeah.
And the whole COVID thing, if I can just, I write about a lot about this and how it affects horticulture. How it affects us all. There's a couple of things that are pretty self-evident. One, oh, here comes my beautiful wife. She's bringing me coffee.
Yay.
She gets a ding.
Susan, get me a cup while you're at it. Could you please?
Easy, light on the cream, though, right?
Yeah, easy on the cream.
On the COVID thing, as we all know, listen, we're all going to die of something. We might get hit by a car, we might die of old age if we're lucky, but what we're not going to die of, at least I'm certainly not, is I'm not going to die of stupid. And so, you know, I'm gonna do what has to be done to keep ourselves zigging while that thing is zagging, because there's a whole lot of people that aren't zigging or zagging anymore. So that's the first thing. Let's just all be smart. Secondly, as far as gardening is concerned, I truly believe, and I've written this a number of times, and perhaps we've read it, that during COVID, all these things that are happening, I have without a doubt, my shoulders are straight, my head is up. We are essential. It's no doubt in my mind that we have proven to be essential, not because my two daughters, by the way, are both in hospitals, both in COVID wards and all that crap. They are really essential, but we are essential in a different way. We are therapeutic. You know, the reason that people garden, this whole 16 million or whatever, because they all of a sudden discovered that, hey, they could put a seed in the ground or a bulb in the ground or a sapling, and they have something to look forward to. That is the one thing that COVID has taken away from many of us, is something to look forward to. And boy, is that not what gardening is. That is who we are. That is what we do. And oh my goodness, it's fantastic.
And I'm sorry. Yes, I know. I brought you up there, and that didn't exactly go the way as planned. So, oh, you know why? Because I meant to do it a different way. So I'll bring you back and bring us back into the screens. And Allan's going to open the door back there, and. All right, let's bring us back in here, and I will.
Oh, there we are.
Yeah, there we are, and I'll bring you back into the corner there. What I actually meant to do was a little smoother. It was going to be more like that. There we go. There we go.
Now you got to see me, unfortunately, but yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Well, you are the star of this particular segment, so. But you know, it's interesting. You mentioned that both of your daughters work in COVID wards. That has to have given you a real appreciation of the kind of work that those people are doing.
you know, when that first hit, and we're in North Georgia. Well, one daughter's in Augusta, where the Masters is taking place right now, and the other daughter is in Macon, Georgia. They are been, you know, nurses, but when this thing got really rough earlier on, I mean, they were stuck in those war. Well, they were there, and now then it went down, and of course now it's going back up, and they're just so tired of it. Well, we're all tired of it, but they are truly tired of it. And I don't know why it seems to keep going up. I just don't understand why people can't figure this out. But nevertheless, it's neither here nor there. Yeah, so they are. So it's been a scary time for everybody. And yeah, we do the best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Peg.
We're getting people asking if you can turn up Alan's volume or if he can move closer to
Yeah,
the mic.
Alan, I was going to ask you to do that too. If you can just give us a little more volume, you're a little lower than the rest of us, and I've
How's
got
that? Is that any better?
that's a little better. Yeah, anything you can do to help with that
Well,
would be
you know, Mike, I have absolutely nothing to say. So if you're not hearing me, it's okay. Just listen to Mike and Peggy. But
Yeah.
anyway, all I was saying is that the COVID thing has certainly shown that people like to do what we do, and they've always liked to do what we do. But now they're just sort of coming out of the woodwork because maybe that's all they have to do. But it's been a good
Well, you
good
know,
year for horticulture, quite truthfully.
it has been, and I can't believe that back in April and May, we were having discussions about whether horticulture, gardening, this industry was essential. I can't believe we were having that places in Michigan closed down. There were places in Illinois that some were able to open. We had a fellow on this show about that time who was an independent garden center operator who was not allowed to open, but he said, but the box stores are open and they're letting people, you know, and it seemed, in hindsight, it seems crazy. But at the time, that's how confusing everything was.
Well, it was confusing, and I was with you. And you know, New Jersey was open and Pennsylvania was closed, and you know, it made not a whole lot of sense to keep people away from being outside and doing those kind of things that really got them through this thing. But no, it was absolutely a good question at the time. But as you said, people always do surprises, usually in a positive way, and so here we are.
Yeah, here we are. And at the time, I remember you telling me, well, the book's going to come out any day now, any day. And that was a kind of a trip for you as well, because a lot of things were, the pandemic was holding it up. And I imagine other things, and, you know, just getting one of these with 1,000 pages, there's a lot to do. So it's the book is out and it's fantastic, and I'm just going to keep telling people that they need to pick up a copy of this book. And if you go, and I've got the link on my blog, go to MikeNowak.net, MikeNowak.net, and if you click on the link to Alan's page and you type in the code Mike, Mike, this comes with no shipping charge at all.
Correct.
And it, since it weighs about 4 tons, that's going to save you a lot of money.
It does. As Peggy was showing, it's great for, so you know, it's great. It's great for muscular control. You really can work out with that book if you don't want to read it. It's also great for dropping on those little critters that are in your garden. Just, you know, any chipmunk you can hit, feel free.
It's good for pressing leaves.
Yeah, pressing leaves. I mean, really, it's a good book. It's a good bookend. But anyway, it's the 4th edition of this book. Believe it or not, Mike and Peggy, I started this thing over 30 years ago, and so things have definitely changed. And particularly in this edition, what I've been able to do in this edition, the 3rd edition, it was 12 years old. Believe it or not, I can't believe it. But so I did this one, and I've added a lot of course, cultivars and genera and species and all those plant things for sure. The introduction you referred to, Mike, I've really, again, gone through a lot of things, north versus south and gardening, and you
Right.
know, what does whole, you know, zone map even mean? What about this whole deer thing? But all of that in the introduction. By the way, if you don't want to read anything, read the introduction. I have more fun writing that than you. And then the other thing I really added to this that I think people will enjoy, particularly your audience, people say, what happened to the asters? They're no longer called asters. Or what happened to, Simisafuga just disappeared on me. It's now
That's the one that
Hey,
really gets to me is Simisafuga. What a great name that was. And
it
now,
was.
And
and
it's gone. Poof.
Sounds like a cold. Sounds like you're sneezing. Actea. But the fact is, what I did is I took, if you there's a whole section in the book now, 3 or 4 pages on what is new based on what the taxonomists are telling us, and what is old, i.e., Simisafuga. And so those are there. The old, the new, even the, right there, taxonomic changes of interest to readers. Here's the one thing that people who quote unquote like this stuff want to understand this whole taxonomy thing. There's no such thing as a wrong name. Okay, there's accepted names. So if you want to call Simisafuga, feel free. You may be the only one still doing it, but it doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that Actea is the accepted name now. And the same thing with all these asters that nobody can pronounce, and all these other names that have been changed. Um, but I'm really happy to have that there because I refer to it. I don't know what's going on half the time, so I'm glad I was able to put it in.
Yeah. Well,
And so that the other thing too with this book, as far as the newer stuff, everything's new, but the whole invasive plant thing, that's been
yeah,
a big.
Yeah.
that was it. That's a great section in there.
Yeah.
but what this calls attention to, and I'm glad you brought that up, and you've written about this in your other books because you're fascinated by names, and and you're fascinated.
Yeah.
And you're fascinated by etymology, not entomology, but etymology,
Oh, absolutely.
origins of names, and you walk this line between the protecting the average gardener from the abuses of nomenclature changing out of nowhere. It seems like it, and I mean, how can you take away the name aster from a plant?
Everybody knows.
Everybody knows,
And it's always going to be aster. It's just,
well, that's always going to be the common name, and that's where the average gardener wins because they still call things black-eyed Susans, and there's 100 black-eyed Susans out there.
So let me just tell you a little story about this whole naming thing. And I know that some of you in the audience perhaps have heard me speak or whatever, but the fact is, what I've done with all my stuff, I hope this book is probably it's a reference book, and you're going to refer to it, but it's also for my neighbor and my daughter. So I've tried to make it so it's readable. And the whole taxonomy, they don't even know what taxonomy means. Okay, so if those people who don't want to read that section, they don't read it. But
Yeah.
I was at a meeting in New York a number of years ago, and it was this real highfalutin meeting, and all these people there, master gardeners and scientists and botanists and all that. And we had this expert and that expert and the other expert, and they had, a rhododendron expert and a good God, and all sorts of stuff. But anyway, the audience asked, one person in the audience said, what do you think about using common names? This was about 10 years ago. Should people use common names or should people use botanical names? And the guy said, and the questioner said, I really think that botanical names just should be used because there's only one, whereas there may be more than one common name for any given plant. The one expert agreed 100%. Yeah, people got to learn botanical names. The other expert agreed 100%. Yes, there's only one name. Botanical name works. I got up and said, you're all full of it. Stupid. If you actually think that gardening is going to survive people like you, the fact is, my daughter, your neighbor, your friends, they like gardening, but they don't want to know necessarily what the botanical name is. They might, and therefore they can learn it. But there's nothing wrong, Mike, with black-eyed Susan. I love that name. There's nothing wrong with naked ladies for Lycoris. There's nothing wrong with all these wonderful common names that have stories behind them. Joe Pine.
You have a whole book about
worry
that.
about anything else. Yeah, and we can talk about that in a minute. But the fact is, after I said that, everybody sort of was silent, and then everybody applauded. Really, come on, we're talking to the real people here, and I'm a scientist. I love the taxonomy. I love the whole scientific element to what we do because long days, short days, shade, sun, they're all science based. But the fact is, hey, it's a shade-loving plant. Whatever.
Well, the point I was going to make is that so you've got the backs of the average gardeners, but you're also a scientist, so you see both sides. And I'll be honest, there are some plants I cannot remember the common name, and I don't know why. I go right to Solidago is one of them. I'm like, why can't I remember whatever that is? Goldenrod. I can never remember goldenrod. And pulmonaria is another one. I actually I think pulmonaria is a great name. Even though
the common name ties in nicely on pulmonaria.
Lungwort.
The thing about these common names, just like botanical names, they all have stories. Okay, often botanical names reflect the person who found it, reflect the area, the region from which it's from. A canadensis, for example. All these botanical names have reasons. Some make more sense than others. But common names, now they have stories. I mean, was there really somebody called Joe Pye? The answer is yes. I mean, and it's a fabulous story. I mean, pulmonaria. What's pulmonaria got to do with it? It was named for the lungs, i.e. the pulmonary system. And it became known as lungwort, the common name, because wart, W-O-R-T, means useful for or heals. So it was useful for or healing ailments of the lung. Now, it didn't work worth a damn, but was part of a great story where the 1700, 1800, the botanists, horticulturists, mostly botanists, of course, all medical people were botanists. And it was called, it was called the Doctrine of Signatures. And this fellow, by the way, I've got all this written down, but this fella said if a plant looks like a body part, it probably heals that body part. No, I mean, it makes no sense. Yeah. But that's called lungwort because it had the spots that looked like the alveoli of the lungs, became known as pulmonaria. Isn't that a cool story? And that lungwort, anytime you see a wart, it means useful for. Spiderwort for spiderwort. Lungwort for that.
It's in traditional medicinals.
Yeah, they're all medicinal of some kind or other. And some made sense and most didn't. They're great stories.
It was actually an article within the last week in the New York Times of how that's making a comeback in time of COVID. Yeah. That people are now looking at those names.
Well, if I don't want to peddle anything, but if I might, I'm just going to mention this book.
Aha! I knew that was going to come. Here we go.
I don't know how to do this in front of the screen. There we go.
Move it to the other way. There you go. There you go. Put it in front of your face.
Naked Ladies and Forget-Me-Nots, How Plants Get Their Names. And believe it or not, Mike and Peggy, as spectacularly wonderful as my new book is with all 1,000 pages, this is my bestseller. And this is where common names come from, Joe Pye. I mean, I won't even, anyway, that book is just, I'm asked to speak, not anymore. I'm not asked to go anywhere, but I have to speak a lot of places. They want no stories.
They want, right. People want stories. There's, what I found is about gardening and gardening shows now. I don't know if you ever had a regular radio show or anything like that. There's two things that people want. They want stories, but they also, back in the day, like 23 years ago, when I started doing this on the radio with Kathy O'Malley at WGN Radio, we thought we were going to turn on the mic and just have a conversation with people, sit around and we're going to have a cup of coffee and we'll talk about our plants and they'll have tips for us. And nope, that's not the way it works. Gardening shows, people want the guru to sit there and they want to pepper them with questions that they answer right on the spot. And they want... Yeah, exactly. And they want that more...
Why did my plant die?
Because you're a bad gardener, that's why.
Right.
They don't, but they do want stories, and stories are great. But more than anything, they want their garden questions answered right now. But I'm not surprised that people respond to your other book because that's what we're talking about here. You bring some of that to Herbaceous Perennials, 4th edition by Allan M. Armitage. We have to keep hitting this so that people know. And I'm telling you, folks, this is like, all right. And I know you know Michael Durr, but this is like having Michael Durr on your shelf. You have this, you have Durr. There's like 2 or 3 other books that are essential books. There's a bulb. That wonderful book is a beautiful, beautiful book. That's another one. And what's Anna? I can't remember her name. I could run and get the book. It's in the other room, but I'll do that during the break and tell you about that one. But there are a few books that are just going to last forever, and you can just open. Even if the varieties change, and they do all the time. What happened in the 12 years since the previous book in terms of varieties? What did you discover? Are we moving in a good direction? I read one place. Monarda. I went to Monarda's. What I did, because I'm not reading 1,000 pages all the way through, and nobody's going to read 1,000 pages all the way through.
Yeah, I dropped into the plants I liked.
Exactly. That's what well, one was Monarda, but you're a little bit disdainful about Monarda there, Mr. Armitage.
Yes. But you ask what's happening. What's happening. Okay, let's use Monarda as an example. If you happen to be where, Monarda's native, and if you happen to have just the old pink or red form of Monarda, it's pretty good. What's happened with the breeding, and I'm talking 20 years ago, a lot of the breeding was done in Europe, a lot of the breeding was done in Holland, and it's great stuff. It's beautiful stuff in a greenhouse, in a container, but for many areas, the darn stuff got mildew. Mildew on Monarda is nothing. I'm not telling any secrets out of school here.
Nope.
And the other thing, it of course became very aggressive. Now, so what's happened? So that's why my comments are my little bit disdainful comments. I've also tried many of the new ones. I can't obviously trial every single plant that comes out, but I try through the gardens I have and the gardens at the university where I was involved in to see how they do. And I'm only in one spot. I'm not in Chicago. I'm in North Georgia. So it's going to be different than what you see. But the fact is, some of these really dwarf, lovely places, the whole world has become dwarf in the world of gardening. Every breeder wants to make dwarf plants so that every retailer can put more shelf space. But the fact is that some of this dwarf stuff, when you put a characteristic like either dwarfness or perhaps one other character, something else might disappear. And I'm really not impressed with a lot of these dwarf ones, but that's me. So, the nice thing about cultivars is we have the ability, we have so much to choose from. And choose something dwarf or something red or something white in Monarda, feel free. The fact that it's not my favorite doesn't mean I don't recommend it. I love to.
Well,
again, another fabulous story, right? It's Oswego tea. It was used as a substitute for tea after the Boston Tea Party. So it's got a great story. So I love the stuff, but that's my issue in the book. I sometimes get a little.
No, and that's the it's the point though. You have your opinions and they spill out throughout the book, but those you back them up with facts and with observations and anecdotal material from other folks. You go for the science, and then you say, this is a plant that maybe you don't want, or it's going to have this problem. I read that about Monarda, and I said, yeah, it gets powdery mildew. So I have a soft spot in my heart for Monarda because my mom grew it and my grandmother grew it. And they called it firecrackers. Firecrackers.
All right, I'll add that to my to the app thing. That's really cool.
Yeah.
But a lot of plants say, "What's the future?" Well, breeding is never going to stop. The breeders, it's like, they're like alcoholics. They just can't stop themselves, and so they're going to be breeding something for better or for worse. And so we're going to get another 30 euchres next year, probably another 30 echinaceas next year. Are they all going to be better than what's out there? Heck no. So you try to
just
find
be
those
new.
that really work. Yeah, but they're going to be new. But I really do try my very best to recommend. Anyhow, and again, this is just the stuff I do. I have a YouTube channel. You can see all the stuff I like in the book. There are ones I say I like better than others, but it doesn't mean the other ones aren't any good. It just means that it's impossible to trial everything.
All right.
And as we talk about Mike, it's all about marketing.
It is. And speaking of marketing, we need to take a short break. As you can see, the program now is allowed to breathe a little bit. These conversations go a lot longer than they did in the past. So we're going to return and do another half hour with Allan Armitage. If you've got questions, Peggy's monitoring the chat room. So pepper Dr. Armitage with your perennial plant questions and comments. You can go to Facebook, you can go to Twitter, you can go to YouTube. It's all going to the same page, which is so cool. All right. And we will be right back with Dr. Armitage after this.
The folks at Blazing Star know that good soil biology means good soil. That's why they sell products from trusted industry leader Tineo that contain more than 30 species of beneficial bacteria and fungi chosen for their critical roles in soil and plant health. In other words, whether you're a farmer or a backyard gardener, they help you grow the life in your soil so your soil can grow your plants. Go to blazing-star.com and check out their BioGarden line for home gardeners.
You can reduce your household garbage 30% by the simple act of composting. But I live in a condo or an apartment, you say. Well, if you're in the Chicago area, contact Collective Resource Compost. They give you a fresh 5-gallon bucket or a 32-gallon neighbor tote if you're working with your community. You fill it with food scraps, they swap it out on a regular schedule, and voila! You're returning organic matter back to the soil instead of creating harmful methane in a landfill. Go to collectiveresource.us. They make composting easy.
There's a new urgency for people to grow their own food, and thanks to Happy Leaf LED grow lights, your seedlings will be healthier with a better germination rate and faster growth. You'll get lower operating costs and higher yields. That's because the wavelengths are tuned to your plant's needs. They have a 50,000 plus hour minimum lifespan, and they're made in America. Go to MikeNovak.net for the code to save 5% on your purchase, and go to HappyLeafLED.com to get more information. Happy Leaf, it's about the light.
Mike Nowak, Mike Nowak, Mike Nowak, Sunday mornings, Peggy Malecki.
All together now.
Mike Nowak, Mike Nowak, Mike Nowak, Sunday mornings with Peggy Malecki.
Cha-cha-cha. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Moskovich.
Yeah, that's our friend.
I'll get my guitar out back there. We'll have a really good.
If you can, that's fine with me. We're talking to Dr. Allan Armitage. And I'm going to do that one, Peggy, before we get back to Dr. Armitage, because what happens is if I'm reading it the next time and trying to deal with Rick at the same time, that gets a little nutty.
And we do have a request from folks, Dr. Armitage. Can you please move much closer to your microphone? Everyone's saying they can't hear you.
Yeah, I don't know if you can turn up your level at all there. While I'm reading this, perhaps you can take a look at your volume and see if there is
look at your audio output setting.
Actually, audio in. So, by the way, the
I can get here.
is that it? If that's it, it is what it is then. So, folks, we'll be right back with Dr. Armitage. The second session of Forefront Ideas in Food and Farming is happening today, but the problem is, unless you're registered, you won't be able to participate. Now, I'm not saying that to be mean. We're saying that so that you'll be prepared for the next workshop on December 13th, which is Regenerative Agriculture, Details of a Profitable Journey. Nationally recognized North Dakota farmer, and boy, they're having a lot of COVID issues right now. Farmer and rancher Gabe Brown stands at the forefront, speaking of forefront, of the regenerative agriculture movement. He is perhaps best known for popularizing the concept of cover crop cocktails as a key strategy for jump-starting soil health and nourishing soil biology. Gabe is a farmer, rancher, author, and healthy food system advocate, and he will share the story of how, after 4 years of hail and drought, he, along with his family, took a broken, degraded, and unprofitable farm, and by following nature's principles, regenerated it into a healthy, profitable farm teeming with life. The Forefront sessions are free online via Zoom, but you need to sign up. Go to mchenry.edu/forefront to register and check out upcoming events in December, January, and February of 2021. Once again, that website is mchenry.edu/forefront. Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Are you delving into the technical aspects of your computer, or are you just going to lean in?
No, I'm going to lean in, but I am delving into it, and I'm not very good at delving, I guess. But I gotta try. Anyway, I'll just yell louder. We have a book club group, by the way. That we're all as they say, elderly, and so we have to be our 10 foot apart thing, and we're just yelling at each other. So I'm used to this because none of us can hear. So, 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 but I'll just try. I don't know what I'm doing here. Let's see. My volume is up, and my input or my output. I'm not sure.
It should be the output. If you can put the output up a little bit, that might help. That's what we're looking for there.
The output is up as high as it's going to get. So
okay. So you folks listening, you get closer to your computers, okay, and just listen to Dr.
Well, just
Armitage.
huddle around the computers here.
That's
right. Sorry.
No. That's don't you worry about that. We will get through this. So here we are, and you've got the book out. Would you explain to me the place of perennials in the garden? You actually go into this just a little bit at the beginning. I mean, you know that they're just one part of any garden. People talk about the bones of the garden, and you talk about the annuals that you fill in. You know, some people even have lawn in their gardens. Who knows?
So let's talk gardening. I do. Oh, by the way, those people who actually are watching this, they probably don't recognize me. So
There we go.
There we go.
There we go. So I thought I better bring my uniform with me anyway. But the fact is, gardening is this hat, by the way, saved my life 1,000 times just for sun, and I'll take it off now.
That's what the Tilly hat.
Tilly hat, yeah, it really is the best hat ever, and truly, I mean, if I was smart back in my youth, I would have invested in liquid nitrogen. Now, those of you who go to a dermatologist know what I'm talking about. So whenever you go there, they zap you, so they get rid of all these things that hopefully won't grow. Anyway, the hat, wear a hat. That's my bottom line. But anyway, let's talk gardening. There is absolutely nothing. I love roses in my garden. Mm-hmm. I hate rose gardens. Okay, I don't want to see a rose garden because I find them after the first 3 sniffs and the first beautiful colors. It's kind of boring, just roses. But roses in the garden, now that's another thing. So perennials in the garden are, to me, I love them. I like trying them. I like doing all of those things. They're kind of essential. But so are my annuals, so are my trees, and so are my shrubs, and my ferns, and my bulbs, and everything else that's in my garden. If you come to my garden, you're all invited to beautiful Athens, Georgia, by the way. Just don't come all at once. But if you come to my garden, I got a ton of things. I put one thing on top of the other because that's my weed control system. Don't let anything grow.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's the way you've got to do it. That's the way I do it as well in my garden is just put so much in. Roy Diblick talks about this all the time. He's not a fan of mulch. And he's been trying to get people weaned off of mulch for a long time. And he says the way you do it is put all your plants close together. And in the old days, we were told that was bad because the air circulation wouldn't be good. So what changed there, Dr. Armitage?
Well, I'll tell you what's changed. People are going to use mulch. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But the fact is that I think what has changed, I don't know if anything's changed, Mike. I think certain people like yourself, like me, perhaps Peg, like Roy, I love to have things in layers. I put ground covers everywhere, and then I plant in the ground cover. Mm-hmm. And then I plant a clematis above the ground cover to go into a tree. So I think that in my garden, and in fact in many people's gardens, there are so many plants to try. Yeah. If you put everything 3 feet apart, you're going to have 5 plants. You put them on top of each other. And again, I say it in all due respect, some of them aren't going to make it, but there we go. Darwinism right there. But I'm not sure the whole air circulation is still important. For instance, if I grow phlox, now there's some fabulous phlox out there that don't get mildew anymore at all. They're spectacular, but some of the old ones perhaps do. I do try to thin those out a little bit. I do try to get a little bit more air circulation around those things, but I still got a clematis growing through it.
Yeah. So and a lot of us are going to have phlox that have been in the garden for years, and you're not going to rip it out. So
you're not. So you do the best you can. IPM, all those things that we're talking about. I don't know anybody who sprays anything anymore, at least who are gardeners. There's a big difference between having a garden and having a landscape. And so if you are a gardener and you get your fingernails dirty, you're not going to be spraying a lot of stuff. You're not. You're going to be working with your
No.
garden. Like your
You know,
best
that's
friend.
so interesting. I'm with you. I find that people are spraying. I'm thinking, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? It's
You're not paying attention.
yeah. And as for phlox, see, I'm a phlox snob. I do not grow phlox.
Oh, I love phlox.
Yeah.
I can't get enough of them.
They just appear in my garden.
Yeah.
They're native, so
Well,
semi-native.
but that's what's changed, I think, for a gardener. And all you have to do is, well, geez, poor people listening to us. There's a ton of things out there to try, and I don't
It's
think
one
you
of our
have to-
listeners just posted lasagna gardening that you're going to just
Yeah,
layer it in
lasagna
with
gardening.
all sorts of things.
Well, again, and that's a preference. I know lots of people have very, very calm and spacious, interesting gardens, but mine is kind of wild. But my wife Susan, she would much rather have a vista. Me, I want stuff on your face. So we come to an agreement.
Well, and one of the things that you admit is that you're not much of a designer. You're just interested in growing plants. And I have told people that over the years. For those people, and there are some people who have a wonderful eye for that. I'm not. I don't think I'm that guy. But the goal, I think, is just have healthy plants. And if you have healthy plants, you're going to be very happy as a gardener. And then you get to do a lot of different things. And you might come up with a beautiful design, or you might not. But if your plants are healthy, you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really respect good design, and it's sort of I can't define it, but I know it when I see it, kind of thing. But for me, I'm not designing anybody else's garden. If they ask me for help, I say, here's some great plants, and just like you, Mike, if they're healthy, then the color will be damned. I mean, if they're healthy, they work well. To me, it's great, and you after a while, just to me, a design evolves. You put all the stuff in, you know what you're doing, and say, oh, maybe I'd like something back there, something up here. As soon as you get to know a bit more, and that's what gardening is. Gardening is an evolution. Your garden's never finished. You don't have to be crazy like we are to enjoy a garden. But oh boy, it's just fun to put something in and see what happens. I'm all for design. I just can't do it.
Well, I like your
too many
comment in the
plants to
book
try.
about you're the guy with the pot and the spade walking around trying to figure out where to put the plant.
Absolutely. It takes me like 3 days to put a plant in because I keep saying, no, that's not going to work. No, that's not going to work. But it's all about trying to get the proper environment. And as well, you mentioned lasagna gardening. That's also a term for layering your soil, just making good soil. Get
Yeah.
good soil, then things fall into place after a while.
We had a question. Somebody wanted, what was that website again? And I realized I hadn't even given out the website. So you can go to allanarmitage.net, and that's ALLAN, Armitage, ARMITAGE.net, if you want to bypass my website, but I've got that link. No. No, you don't want to bypass Mike.
Don't bypass Mike. Just go. In fact, because of Mike and Peggy, that's why I put this free postage on. For the people who can bear us, you deserve a bonus. And so if you go on the website, and by the way, that Mike thing goes for any book, including the new book that we were talking about, the Naked Lady book.
Oh, great.
Any book at all, we'll give you free postage. So if you want to do 2 books or 5 books, I don't care. This is because these guys actually asked me to come on this thing. I said, okay.
And there I'm going to hold it up again. I mean, you are going to make your friends happy. You're going to make yourself happy if you get a copy of this book. And I know I'm hawking it mercilessly, but it is that good. It's something that someday the power's going to be out and you can't get on the internet, and you're going to pick up the book and look something up.
Start reading.
So you can, again, allanarmitage.net or go to mikenovak.net, where I've got the links there. And again, you get free postage if you purchase any of Dr. Armitage's books. Peggy?
I was going to ask, what surprises did you find as you were revising the book? Were there some things that you just didn't expect?
Well, when you asked about what's new and what's different and varieties, cultivars, nothing goes away. I was going to try and get rid of half these cultivars. I mean, I got cultivars back for the first edition. Yarrow, there must be 50 different cultivars. I figured, who can buy this? You could find anything on the internet, it turns out. So,
Wow.
you know, that while everything has changed, nothing has changed in some respects. Although
Yeah.
those that are marketed are the ones you're going to see at your garden center, and the ones you're going to see, you know, when you first go online. What else has changed for sure? That again, these things like this whole invasive thing has changed. We still have the same concerns we had 30 years ago with insects, disease, and deer, and this and the other thing, but they've all gotten a little bit more upfront. We think we know what we're doing. IPM has really changed a lot of people's outlook on what they do, and that's. You know, I think that's a good thing. Integrated pest management is what the IPM, integrated pest management. In other words, use your eyeballs first. Don't get the sprayer out.
Well, you know, it's interesting. When I started in this business about 23 years ago, IPM was cutting edge. You were still trying to explain to people what IPM, as you say, integrated pest management, and one of the best ways I've ever heard it described is you start with the least toxic method of dealing with pests and diseases, and then you work your way to the most toxic, and the goal is that you never get to the most toxic method.
It's amazing. I tell my friends, I mean, I do what I call common sense gardening, and people come here or whatever. And so the common sense thing about this whole pest thing, or disease that matters, first thing, look at the darn plant. See if there's anything there. Your first line of defense is your eyeball. Your second line of defense is take your hose and knock these darn things off if it's an insect, and just do something simple like that. The last thing you want to do is, you know, put all these chemicals on that are going to kill everything that's good as well as everything that's bad. So we use it at the very end. But like you say, least toxic is my eyeball. Most toxic is my 7 dust, and that's about as toxic as I'm ever going to get. So, but and again, if I might, Mike and Peggy, one of the things you said, you know, pick up the book and read it. That's great. But the other thing I've done, and it's on the web site if you want, is I've developed an app for everybody to put in their back pocket. So you have horticulture in your back pocket, and on the app, I've got things like IPM. What does it mean? What do you do? As well as every darn plant known to man. So it's there for you. There you go. Thank you, Peggy. But
it even says at the top, everything.
Everything. It costs you $4.99, but you know, think of that if you go to McDonald's and what happens to that $4.99. and I update it all the time. But anyway, I'm just saying I'm in your back pocket if you want me to be. And it's a nice thing to do, and you can easily get that on any.
But I will say something. Oh yeah, we got some great comments.
We've got some questions and comments here too.
All right. I'll just say something, and then Peggy, why don't you get to some of those questions and comments?
Sure.
Apps. I've tried a number of apps, and some of them work and some of them don't. And it's there are some really good ones. I guess iNaturalist is a really, really good app. In fact, we were hoping to have Jeff Screntny on the show, who's trying to add 2,500 plants and animals to iNaturalist in 1 year. So I don't know if he's going to do that. Yeah. But so thank goodness you have your app out there too, Dr. Armitage. So Peggy, what are you seeing online here?
Well, I will start with the newest, coming from Audrey, who is she and her husband run a meadery. She's asking about heirloom plants, bee-friendly flower bulbs, and other plants that are bee-friendly. How are we addressing that?
Oh, that's easy to address, and I say easy, not easy to address, maybe not easiest thing to do. There's a ton of plants that are pollinator friendly and particularly bee friendly. You know, and they don't have to be native, but although many of our native plants are, since we don't have hardly any native bees here, most of the bees that we have native bees to be sure, but like for instance, the honeybee's not native and stuff like that. But the fact is there are a lot of plants that attract bees and pollinators, or Monarda, for example.
Here.
So there's our heirloom plants. But even an introduced plant like, I don't know if you know Biden's, but it's a little annual. There's a ton of bees just love that thing. Go to Calamintha. And
I think that's where we went. We left right at that point.
It's a lovely little white plant. I mean, it just attracts a ton of bees. And it's an easy plant to grow. I think it was a perennial plant of the year last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And so everybody has it. So to answer your question, Audrey, the bees, and people are sort of afraid of bees, but the fact is, the bee is a lot more interested in the flower than they are in you. So absolutely, there's a bunch.
So we have
one thing I might add too. Excuse me. One thing I might add is on that app, if you get it, I have a whole section on pollinators. So those plants that attract pollinators like bees and butterflies and things.
excellent.
Uh,
That's something else that you were doing, and I know Mike and I both watched a couple of them. Your walkabouts during COVID, where you took people through your garden.
Isn't that fascinating?
A couple of our
I-
listeners
it's
have
sort-
said that really helped them and inspired them.
Oh, good. Thank you. I decided to, I have a little group that tries to keep me on the straight and narrow here because, I'm an old Luddite. I don't quite know all this stuff, but I'm learning very quickly. And so we decided just to do a walkabout about April in my garden. It's just a little residential garden, 60 by 100, whatever. But I have a ton of plants in there. And I take my little phone and I walk about and on a Facebook Live. And I, had a couple hundred people. And then I had 500 people. I had 2,000 people walking around with me from all over the world on this crazy little phone and through my crazy little garden. So it's been a lot of fun. And the last one I did, I talked to Mike about it this morning. I did the last one just last weekend, I think, in a garden center near Atlanta, where I talked about, or where the experts with me talked about houseplants, succulents, and bringing them in and all that kind of stuff. And we had nearly 2,000 people on that one. So it's really been a lovely way to learn. Again, my point is people want to know. I'm not forcing anything down anybody's throat, but it's amazing that they just like to, they enjoy it. And I do too, so it works.
wow, somebody's backing up. I can hear them beeping there.
Not here. Or
Uh,
there would be barking as well.
all right, we've got like about 5 minutes left here. Do we have any questions that have come in? I saw one interesting comment about clematis. We were talking about clematis, and some people, it was.
Deanie says, Mom wanted clematis in the garden, so as a welder, I created a metal tree form for it to grow up. It became a beautiful focal point for the garden. I so need your new book.
So there we go.
Well, I love clematis. You go through various stages of life. I went through my geranium stage of life with hardy geraniums, and that just what killed me. I'm going through my clematis stage of life now, and in my tiny garden, I probably have 12 of them, and this is tiny garden. So I love
what
them
if
when I
your
put them through
walkabouts
trees,
focused on them?
Yeah, they're just fun to do. So good for you indeed.
So what's next? I mean, obviously you want to get this book out there. As you mentioned before, it's possible that there will be a 5th edition, but it's way too early to think
early
about
for that. I want to tell you. Well, the interesting thing about this book, I know we don't have a lot of time, is that book is available both in soft cover and hardcover. And I know you guys have the soft, and it's great. But for what it's worth, if you go on the website, it asks you want soft or hard. The hard is only $10 more than the soft. It's outselling the soft 10 to 1.
Really?
So really, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And now my publisher deals with schools and that stuff, and that's where the soft are going, to be sure. But anyway, of course,
It will
sold
hold
out,
up
but
longer. Well, the hardcover, especially for in and out of the garden and everything else, will hold up longer.
So, but that's cool, and I'm actually doing. I'm trying to work on another book that has nothing to do with horticulture, but that's yet to be done, to be sure. But I keep writing. I write the column for Greenhouse Grower.
Yeah.
I'm always updating the app and the YouTube, and
You've
I
got
have a
your
couple
blog.
of online classes. Yeah, that newsletter, whatever. I just try to stay out of trouble.
Hey, and I'm glad you mentioned that, staying out of trouble, because the one thing I did want to talk to you about, and we have just a couple minutes, is you voted in Georgia in this past election. Congratulations. And people are going to say, well, yeah, what, everybody votes. Well, what's your particular story there, Allan?
It's again, I guess I just turned into a storyteller, but we're Canadian. Okay, we came from Canada.
Hey,
and we've been in Georgia for a long time, and we were on green cards for a long time, and we could do everything you do, including paying taxes, etc., except we were not able to vote. Well, things have gotten a little crazy in this country, and obviously for Canadian, twice as crazy. But so we went through just 2 years ago, we became American citizens, my wife and I. So we are now Americans, and we have dual citizenship. But this was our first ever federal vote. And I couldn't wait, and I just was so happy because, well, we did what every American should do. We took advantage of what we call democracy, and so we voted, and away we go. And so that was our first one, and it was great. And people in line actually learned that we was our first one. Didn't matter they're Democrat, Republican, whatever. They all shook our hands, or at least, well,
They elbowed
didn't
us.
shake anything, but
Yeah.
did our elbow, and it was nice, and we feel very, very comfortable here.
And here you are in the state that was the focal point of the elections as well. I mean, what a bonus that was.
Yeah, no, who would have thunk that we would go Democrat, and it certainly, again, without getting political, certainly made my heart sing. And we have, and Georgia being a swing state, who knew? But we also have 2 Senate races coming up that are extraordinarily important. So yeah, we're right in the middle of it, and I'm happy to be.
Here's what you do. You say for every vote for the blue candidate, you'll give them a copy of this book, right?
They all need it.
I would love to, believe me.
I don't think you can do that. Actually, that's called bribe. So we're not going to do that.
Bribe.
Yeah.
And also called going broke, but
Yeah. You would absolutely go broke. Dr. Allan Armitage, thank you so much. What a pleasure to have you on again. Pick up a copy of Herbaceous Perennial Plants, 4th edition. You can go to allanarmitage.net. It's ALLAN, just so you spell it correctly. And if you're a little worried about that, go to MikeNowak.net, and all the links are there. And I guess we're going to have to check in very soon and see how everything's going.
please do. Let's do this again. I love it. And thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. And this is great. Thank you, Peggy and Mike. You're doing a fabulous service for everybody.
Well, thank you, Allan, and so are you. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back to talk birding.
Hi, I'm Vic Nakashima with Bartlett Tree Experts. Let me ask you something. Have you ever considered having a professional arborist prune your trees? You and your trees would benefit from it, and I can show you why. Follow me. One of the more common reasons for pruning is the removal of dead branches. Now, in truth, with a little help from the wind, a branch like this would simply break off and fall on its own, but in a very uncontrolled way. And a branch this size falling from this height could be a very serious hazard. Our team of arborists, through pruning, will ensure that these branches make it to the ground in a safe way. Stand clear. All clear. When necessary, we can use ropes and rigging gear to control branches once they're cut, protecting anything of value that might lie below. You'll notice that when a branch simply breaks off on its own, it usually leaves behind a stub. And it seems harmless enough, but this is actually now an impediment to the tree's natural process to close over that wound. By making a precision cut, an experienced arborist can expedite that process, shielding this site from pests and decay. When these lateral branches grow too long, they can actually become too heavy and break. But we know how to prune to reduce the weight and almost eliminate this risk. And we can also prune them to make sure that they don't contact your house, while still keeping the tree's health and beauty intact. Stand clear. All clear. Worried about your tree blowing over in the wind? We can selectively remove live branches so that strong winds will pass through your tree's canopy more easily. You know, hazard reduction is important, but pruning can also provide harmony to your landscape. These lower branches are blocking the sun and shading out this garden, and the lawn is suffering as well. By pruning these branches, we can raise the crown and achieve the goal of sunlight. It may surprise you to know that Bartlett Tree Experts also specializes in the pruning of ornamentals. There's a lot to consider when you're pruning a tree like this, and we do it every day. So, whether it's fruit trees, shrubs, young trees, or mature, Bartlett Tree Experts can provide all your pruning needs.
Welcome to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Green, gardening, and environment radio with just a soupçon of humor. Or is that a dash? Brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com. Here they are again, Peggy Malecki and Mike Nowak.
All I need is good food to eat and make me healthy, wealthy, wide awake. Lettuce, tomatoes, rutabagas. What about those sweet potatoes? All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good tools to make me music, porches, lawn serene. Give me all.
And here we are back on the show. Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. And look at this, and everybody's here, ready to go with the next segment because Peggy and I got an email the other day from our buddy who's in the lower left corner of your screen. And if you're just listening on the audio, well, he's going to say hello, and his name is Bob Dolgan with Turnstone Strategies, LLC. Bob, how are you?
Doing well. It's a little rainy and cold today, but hopefully it clears up later and we can go out and look for some birds here in the forest preserves of the northwest side.
Yeah, I don't know why lately Sunday mornings just seem to be rainy and cold, or just overcast, or just sort of dark lately.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because it's like our day to get out a little bit, but that's all right. We're gonna make the best of it.
On his right there is Stephanie Beilke. She's Conservation Science Manager at Audubon Great Lakes. Good morning, Stephanie.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you both on the show. I mentioned that Bob sent an email the other day, and it was about, we just talked with Dr. Allan Armitage very, very briefly about the election, and he got to be part of it in Georgia for the very first time as a U.S. citizen. And then, Bob, you sent this thing about what that's going to mean for birds. And if you're like me and you're like Peggy and like you, Bob, obviously, and Stephanie, we all get bombarded with environmental newsletters and emails.
Fills our inboxes, yes.
Yeah, the inboxes are full, and Peggy will attest to this, as I will, that a lot of the news is not good. That we're, especially when it comes to birds, there are all kinds of threats to birds right now. We know the populations are dwindling, but unfortunately, even the protections for birds are under siege, and that's not a good thing. So, Bob, what made you write your article about how things might change come January 20th?
Sure. So I was curious to see, actually, in the Biden administration platform, or the Biden campaign platform, I should say, at that time, was there anything about bird conservation? And there was a whole lot about climate change, which is great. And it looks like, the president-elect will re-enter the Paris Climate Accords. But one thing I did find that, and I was trying to tie it to our local birds, because I think we are bombarded with so much information about all the threats that have taken place over the past 4 years. I mean, any number of, legislative or administrative, concerns, from the Migratory Bird Treaty Act to the Endangered Species Act. And so I thought I'd look, specifically, what would a Biden administration actually do? And one of the planks in the platform had to do with the Clean Water Act, and that is increased enforcement of polluters, or against polluters, and holding them accountable. And so I went back and looked at an unfortunate incident that had happened here at Burns Harbor, Indiana, in 2019, where there was a spill of cyanide, actually, that killed about 3,000 fish. And so, if there's been a lot of there's been litigation related to that, and there's been a sort of what I would describe as, from what I can tell and from what I heard from the Environmental Law and Policy Center, a sort of low level of enforcement. And so what about birds in this context and local birds? So I looked up to see, and I knew that a purple sandpiper, which is a pretty unusual bird that comes down from the Arctic and comes over here to the Great Lakes only occasionally, had been seen there in 2019 as well. And so I kind of tied the piece back to the purple sandpiper and other shorebirds that are going to forage in that same water where that spill occurred. So let's hope that with a new administration, there's more enforcement against polluters.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you tied to real quick was the Environmental Law and Policy Center's report that focused in on Region 5 of EPA, talking about how both shrinking funds and shrinking staffing levels in the last 4 years has really driven this.
Yeah, and it I think it can be hard to kind of grasp exactly how that plays out. And so I took a look at the ELPC report, and the way it plays out is that's absolutely correct. There's decreased staffing, there's decreased funding, and there's more lax sort of enforcement and regulation of industries that pollute. And I think it can be hard to kind of find a really local example sometimes to sort of help personalize and localize what that means. And so there are probably many more examples, unfortunately. Not far from Burns Harbor, we have East Chicago, Indiana, where there's been really terrible impacts to the drinking water there, almost on the level of a Flint, Michigan. And the EPA has really moved slowly and almost said that everything's better there already. So when it's not, you can just talk to any resident there and they'll tell you that it's not. So I think there's a lot, hopefully a bit of optimism. There's still a lot that will need to be done or undone for the next few years.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate that we have to get back all of the progress that was made in 8 years of the Obama administration, and some of it was overturned. Other parts of it are in the courts. I can't even imagine what it's like to just get back to square one and then try to move forward. Even the Migratory Bird Treaty is under attack. The Endangered Species Act is. These are cornerstones of environmental policy in America. Who could have predicted that some of this would be in danger? So these are perilous times for birds and for other critters out there, Bob.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it just seems these were things, at least for me, I almost took for granted, the Endangered Species Act and the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And then to hear that they're going to be scaled back in some way is just unfathomable. I mean, we're talking about everything from chimney swifts being, removed from a chimney, whether that's permissible in their nesting, to our beloved Great Lakes piping plovers, and maybe having more industrial enterprises popping up near where they nest. I mean, it's very hard for me to understand why that would be done when we have so much to, and in fact, bird populations are under greater threat, as I'm sure you've reported on. I mean, we've seen declines in bird populations over the past 3 to 4 decades on the order of 30%. So it seems like, why would we do these things to actually make it tougher for them to get by when they're already facing so many threats?
Yeah, and by the way, you mentioned the piping plovers or piping plovers, however you decide to pronounce it. Bob Dolgan, and under your name it says Turnstone Strategies LLC. I could just as easily have put director of Monty and Rose, which is a wonderful film that we've discussed on this program before. Was part of the One Earth Film Festival. It has been seen a lot of places. It's an award-winning film. And you're working on Monty and Rose Part 2, aren't you?
Yeah, thank you so much. Monty and Rose was a film about Chicago's piping plovers that I made last year. The plovers they came back in 2020, so we're going to make a sequel to that film. And I just in the past month had been up in Western Michigan, where these birds were actually hatched in 2017. And high on the sand dunes there is where
By
Monty
Silver
came
Lake?
from.
Is that where you were?
Silver Lake, yeah, Silver Lake State Park was where Monty was from, and Muskegon State Park, which is where Rose is from. And I think what I'm really excited about is, first of all, the video we got. Our videographer Mitch took incredible aerial footage and other shots up there in Western Michigan. It's going to be such a contrast. We have beautiful shots of Chicago, but it's such a different environment. And then we'll trace their story up to the present, and then have a bit about 2020 story in the end of the piece. And we've also gone back and interviewed some of the same people who were in the previous film and checked in with them. So it's going to be, I'm really looking forward to when it's done being able to share that. But I think, it just shows, hopefully will show the value that a single species can bring, at both in terms of the community that sprung up around Monty and Rose in Chicago. And there was a community before Chicago and continues to be on the western side of Michigan where folks are over there monitoring plovers too. So, this is a story it's a Great Lakes story as much as a Chicago story. And hopefully that will come across in this next film. So I'm looking forward to sharing it.
And we will share it on this program. So that takes us to Stephanie Beilke from Audubon Great Lakes. You've been watching this as well. You obviously recognize Monty and Rose as a wonderful success story and a marketing tool, I would imagine, for the work you're doing. What I want to ask is, because everything turns on the pandemic this year, earlier in the year, there were especially the lakefront was a place where very few human beings were showing up with good reason. That kind of, what were you seeing there, and has that changed as the year has gone on, Stephanie?
Well, the place where Monty and Rose were nesting at Montrose Beach was technically closed by the park district. And still is. So we have seen a big reduction in people using the beach there. And I think that really helped Monty and Rose make sure that they were safe and that they were protected from disturbance, because that's one of the biggest threats that face piping plovers, is especially actually dogs off leash, which happens even though dogs aren't permitted in the area, in the natural area where they nest. But sometimes, people are walking by, they're playing sports, they have dogs, and that can potentially lead to nest failure or chicks being predated. So I think that this year was definitely a good year. We saw 3 chicks fledge and another successful nest. And this year, the pandemic worked in their favor. It was a little bit more difficult to make sure we had monitors getting out in time, but we were out and making sure that any other kind of threats that were out there for those birds, we made sure that they had a successful nesting season.
But that's just one species. There's a lot that goes on along the lakeshore and Lake Michigan. What the National Audubon is working on a number of things. One of the things you guys alerted me to is survival by degrees, 389 bird species on the brink. And as Bob alluded to earlier, it found that 2/3 of North American birds are at risk from climate change. So we've got this pandemic, which is one thing, and that's affecting people, but climate change continues unabated, and we've got all those other species. So can you describe that work a little bit by Audubon?
Sure, yeah. So Survival by Degrees is our latest climate report that came out last year. And you can find that on National Audubon's website, audubon.org. And it talks about how we could lose 2/3 of our birds if we have a warming up to 3 degrees Celsius. But it also brings in an element of hope in that if we are able to prevent that warming and stick with a lower trend of just a 1.5 degree increase, which is where we're kind of at already right now. But if we're able to prevent an increased warming, which is projected, then we could save 150 species from becoming extinct or severely endangered because of climate.
And that would be significant. And also in terms of the Great Lakes, another report you sent to us was which Great Lakes wetlands do birds need most? And you guys are trying to determine that also.
Right. So the Great Lakes have their own threats that they face because of climate change. And some of those are increased fluctuations of water level. Right now, or we've been in a period of extremely high, record high water levels in the Great Lakes. And we've also seen record lows in the last few years. And we also have concerns of flooding and drought. And because of all of these threats, we have to take a look at our wetlands, which are the interface between the Great Lakes and our river systems, and also really important habitat for a lot of threatened bird species that we refer to as marsh birds or wetland birds. And we did this prioritization, determine where we should work to have the biggest impact on these bird populations in the Great Lakes. So we worked with spatial scientists on our National Audubon National Science Team and came out with this map that you can take a look at. I believe you can maybe provide the link in some of the comments here, but we are using that map to guide Audubon Great Lakes work so that we can go to some of these really critical wetlands and restore them for birds and make them more resilient for climate change that we are going to be seeing.
We should get that map.
They're all up.
See, Peggy's all over this.
I love this restream. I can boom out to everything at once.
So this has just changed your life, hasn't it, Peggy? This is great.
And Kayla's busy tweeting.
Good for her. Great. And something else you guys are doing this week that I want to mention is you're hosting a webinar Thursday, right? Is that it? I think.
Yep, Thursday the 19th.
Right.
So that webinar is going to be focused on one of our wetlands here in the Chicago region, where we're kicking off one of our restoration projects that's going to be connecting Powderhorn Lake back to Wolf Lake.
On the southeast side.
Yep.
Yeah. What does that mean, to connect Powderhorn Lake back to Wolf Lake? I mean, for the average person who's kind of shrugging and going,
Sure.
Yeah, so what's that all about?
Yeah, so probably not surprising, the Chicago area, a lot of our water bodies have been severely altered and changed, and we no longer have natural flow between water bodies that we would normally have that ensures the right kind of habitat type that birds need. And when you get, stagnant wetlands, you have an increase in invasive plant species, and they can kind of take over, and you don't have as much interface between open water and native wetland vegetation that is really important for birds, but also is an important mechanism for making sure that water is cleaned. So we get clean water for people and for birds, and better habitat for birds.
And that kicks off again it's a webinar this Thursday, 6 p.m., November 19th. And I have the link at MikeNowak.net, and maybe we can get that link out as well, Peggy.
It's done. Yes.
Okay, fine. It's like,
Just
it's
sit
done.
back and
Just, what? Okay, I'm just going to have some coffee here and sit back and see what happens.
Can I say I registered for it too?
Yes, you
because I
can.
did.
Okay, there you go. And we hope more people
But that was
register.
yesterday, not today.
Oh, okay. Well, you're really ahead of the game. So, in the remaining minutes we have left, I'm kind of interested in both. You both approach birding from slightly different positions. Bob, you're the marketing guy and looking for strategies, and you're on the scientific end. Stephanie, I'm just kind of interested in where you feel as we come to the end of 2020. And Bob, you've already mentioned that the elections have consequences and it changes things. But what are your observations on the year, and how do you feel has been as a birding year, Bob?
Great question. So it's actually been a pretty interesting and good birding year in a lot of ways. I mean, we've seen a big increase in the number of people interested in birding because we're, stuck at home looking in our backyards a lot more.
Yeah.
And it's been a respite for people to get out. And I think park sort of visitorship has shown that in a lot of places. So it's actually been good. It's been, as Stephanie mentioned, for birds like Monty and Rose at a closed Montrose Beach, it was likely good that there weren't that many people out there for them this year, and they were able to kind of spread out on the beach, and they successfully fledged 3 chicks. So in that regard, it's been good. And then there's been some really interesting sightings in 2020 here in the Chicago area. There's what's called a winter finch eruption happening right now.
No.
Eruption, IRRUPT.
The pine siskins along
not
with
an eruption.
Okay, that's different. Yeah.
Yeah, the finches and the pine siskins.
The pine siskins, the purple finches, the common redpolls are around, and many others, evening grosbeaks. So there's been a lot of good things about birding this year, and I think it's been a great outlet for people to take their minds off of things, and it's one thing that hasn't really changed all that much. It's kind of interesting, but still, I think there's a lot to do to educate the public about birds and all the treasures that we have right here, even in Chicago.
Do you think that what's happened has long-range repercussions? Certainly, with Monty and Rose, you kind of caught a break this year. Last year was fraught because there was going to be the rock concert on the lake, and there were and there's the usual activity on the most populated beach in Chicago. And then this year, the pandemic happened, and it allowed you, it seems to me, to sort of, to solidify the position of that Monty and Rose have, and get the science out and protect, create a protected area for those birds. Is that going to hold, do you think, Bob and Stephanie? Or do we have to worry once the pandemic is over that we're back to protecting those birds from dogs and volleyball players and joggers and everything else? Stephanie, maybe you would like to address that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with, or just on Bob's point that, the birds out there showing us that they can be really resilient by, even though they have so many threats against them, when you provide them the habitat that they need, they can thrive. And that's a really positive message that, I look to and keep reminding myself that even though we do have all these threats, that the birds want to survive, and we know what kind of tools we can use to help them. I think
I was just going to ask you, the birds, the species that Bob mentioned a little earlier, the eruption, is that what it is, Bob? What is this? Is this an anomaly, or is it related to anything in particular, Stephanie?
So there is some, every year there's a winter finch report that uses the data that we have on different masts of, which is like crops of pine cones and seeds up in the boreal forest. And if it's not such a good year for those crops, then those bird species that rely on those tend to move south and look for food elsewhere. And so this does happen periodically. And so we have some information that helps us understand what's going on there. But I also think with a lot of these birds coming here, it's a really important reminder that these birds rely on this habitat type, the boreal forest, which is one of the most threatened ecosystems for due to climate change, because it's going to have to keep pushing north with warming, and it's going to run out of space to go to. So a lot of these birds that we really get excited to see in the Chicago region, those are some of our most threatened species.
Yeah, and Peggy knows that because she can look out her back door and just see all these species, and she knows what they are. I'm not that guy, so that she understands that a lot better than I do. So your work this year, Bob, what's obviously you're going to finish Monty and Rose 2. What else are you looking forward to doing?
So I just started a weekly newsletter called This Week in Birding that will be available starting actually this Wednesday, which is the 1-year anniversary of Illinois Piping Plover Day. Hooray. So
there you go.
Yeah, all right, thanks. So This Week in Birding, the information is at twibchicago.com, twibchicago.com. And the idea is to provide people in their inboxes information about bird identification, bird conservation, and bird behavior on a weekly basis. So I'm really excited to get back to doing some writing. In the meantime, finishing up the Monty and Rose, the second Monty and Rose film, and also just celebrating Montrose Beach. I want to just put a plug in for the fact that there is an effort underway to expand the protected area at Montrose Beach right now that probably wouldn't have taken place if it hadn't been for Monty and Rose and the pandemic, frankly. So another bright spot.
Well, I'm hoping that happens. And again, go to twibchicago.com for This Week in Birding. That's the new effort by Bob Dolgan. And Stephanie Beilke, thank you so much for being with us. Folks can go to Audubon as well. I've got the link up on my website and the various initiatives that we talked about. Thank you so much for being part of the program this morning. And let's all keep our fingers crossed for our birds and their health as we move forward. And I'm hoping that the numbers can go up, but it's a little touch and go at the moment. So thank you both. You guys have a great Sunday, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, it's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Beilke, meteorologist Rick DeMaio, coming up next. The world has changed. A year ago, you were growing food because it was fun. Now it's important. That's why you need Happy Leaf LED grow lights. Thanks to the best science, the wavelengths are tuned to your plant's needs. They're versatile, they're elegant, they have a 5-year warranty, and they're made in America. Peggy and I are huge fans. Go to MikeNovak.net for the code to save 5% on your purchase. Go to HappyLeafLED.com to get more information. Happy Leaf, it's about the light.
Collective Resource Compost wants to show you how they make composting easy in Chicagoland. You can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by diverting food scraps from landfills. CRC brings you a fresh 5-gallon bucket or a 32-gallon neighbor tote with each pickup. You fill it with organic matter, they swap it out, and get it to a commercial composting operation. Composting is what nature would do if we just got out of her way. Learn how easy it is to divert waste at your home, school, or workplace. Go to collectiveresource.us.
Since 2001, DiveHeart has been revolutionizing rehabilitation using zero gravity and scuba therapy to give confidence, independence, self-esteem, and yes, freedom to children, veterans, and others with disabilities. At DiveHeart, we believe in the power of partnership because together we can do great things. Let DiveHeart help you imagine the possibilities in your life. Go to diveheart.org to learn more.
Whether you have a garden, a farm, or grow houseplants, you need microbial buddies to reconnect you to nature. The folks at Blazing Star sell probiotics from industry leader Tineo Biologicals, which means they sell good soil biology, which means they maximize soil biodiversity. That results in healthy soil and healthy plants. Tineo beneficial microbial soil components will add a major boost to depleted soils. Go to blazing-star.com and check out their BioGarden line for home gardeners. Okay, welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. What are you embarrassed about, Peggy?
No, it's just like, oh, COVID songs again.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's like it looks like we might be going back into the COVID music because it's back. So I'm just trying to keep a smile on my face while we do this. Well, I'm going to let you do this. What?
Yeah, so I was going to smile about some of the Forefront programs coming up.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. But before you do that, let's just let's go to our friend Rick. You're there, aren't you?
I'm there.
Okay. Well, we'll be with you in exactly 60 seconds. Go for it, Peggy.
Well, the second session of Forefront, Ideas in Food and Farming, it's happening today. But unless you're registered, you won't be able to participate today. We say that so you'll be prepared for the next workshop, which is December 13th. Regenerative Agriculture, Details of a Profitable Journey. Nationally recognized North Dakota farmer and rancher Gabe Brown stands at the forefront of the regenerative agriculture movement.
They use the word forefront. See, that's at the forefront. I get it.
There we go.
Okay.
He's perhaps best known for popularizing. Why didn't you pick a word I can say?
I don't know. That's my fault. You can blame me.
For making popular the concept of cover crop cocktails as a key strategy for jumpstarting soil health and nourishing soil biology. Now, Gabe's a farmer, rancher, author, and healthy food system advocate. He'll share the story of how, after 4 years of hail and drought, he, along with his family, took a broken, degraded, and unprofitable farm, and by following nature's principles, regenerated it into a healthy, profitable farm teeming with life. The Forefront sessions are free, online via Zoom, but you do need to sign up. You can go to mchenry.edu/forefront to register and also check out their upcoming events for December, January, and February of next year. That's mchenry.edu/forefront.
All right. Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Let's go to meteorologist Rick DeMaio. And all I got to ask you, Rick, is why do Sunday mornings seem to be gray and dull and just kind of nasty?
Yeah, but last Sunday morning was nice. You remember that?
Yeah, that's true. It was. It was last.
It was nice last week.
That was that crazy 7 days in a row of plus 70 temperatures in November, which had never, ever happened before in Chicago.
I know, and this is even if you use data from Midway Airport or the lakefront, because remember our site of our long-term climatological history for this area has moved a couple of times, which is oftentimes why you'll see records for overnight low temperatures being much colder at O'Hare in the last 40 years as opposed to in the early 1800s and early 1900s when the official observation site was Daley Plaza. That was pretty crazy stuff. And it's almost like last Sunday, Mike, was beautiful. The sun came up, and today is it's cloudy. It's almost like this morning, President Trump sent out a tweet saying that, President Biden won this rigged election, and there was some hope that he was going to concede. But then his anti-concession medication kicked in, and about 90 minutes later, he said, "I'm not going to concede. We're going to keep fighting until we win." So, who knows? He's all over the place. But as long as we know that come January 20th, the United States will be back in the Paris Climate Accord, that's all I care about at this point.
Mm-hmm.
That is a really good point. Yes, we need to be in that accord. So it's good to hear. So
yeah, and a lot of people don't realize this, but when we signed on to the Paris Climate Accord November 6th, we did so with the almost the kind of fear back then in 2016 that the tea leaves were kind of showing Trump. But what people don't realize is once you signed on to it, you were in it for 4 years. So even though President Trump came out in that Rose Garden speech and said we picked Paris or we picked Pittsburgh over Paris, not realizing that Pittsburgh at one point was one of the dirtiest cities on planet Earth with all the coal and oil drilling that was going on in that particular area, and they've cleaned it up. So that was pretty much the wrong city to pick. But little did people know that we were in that until November 6, 2020. We only got out of it officially last week, even though President Trump said back in 2017, we're not going to stay in this thing. So we're only going to be out of it for a period of about 70 days. And as soon as we get back into it, hopefully there'll be a little bit more federal government intervention and interaction with some of the academic and some of the research communities who basically stubbed their nose at the president and said, we don't care what you say, we're in this, and we're in this for the long haul.
And let's be honest about it. The Paris Accord is a kind of roadmap. It's not legally binding to any country. It is just a way forward so we can stop putting so much carbon dioxide into our atmosphere. And there are people I've had on this show before, like Guy McPherson, who says, "Oh, we're way past that, and we're screwed at this point." But better that we go down fighting than just throwing our hands in the air.
Right, but I mean, how long can you ignore that little? Yeah, right, Peg. But how long can you ignore that thing that keeps coming up on your dashboard that says maintenance required, right? before your car seizes up, right?
Right.
I mean, you look and you go, I got another 500 miles. It's one thing with oil, but once the gas goes all the way down below F or below E on your meter, you got to pull over and do something about it. And
stop in the middle of the road.
Hopefully, yeah, we're not in the middle of the road, right, Peg? Hopefully, we'll be able to do something about that once January comes around, as I mentioned. And who knows? Maybe the president will have some different thoughts over the next week or two. I don't know. But you know what? In all fairness, and I have to be honest about this, he's doing what he thinks needs to be done to make sure that the people who supported him feel like they're being justified for voting for him. He's going through the motions of, having a recount, which is legally, that's fine. He's going through the motions of having, some of these lawsuits levied against certain states, even though there's absolutely no evidence. And in another week or two, they'll realize that it's frivolous. But there's nothing wrong a week after the president-elect was called by the, news outlets to do what he needs to do. So I think for our sake, we just need to chill out and realize that this is part of the process. And even though, if you think about it, Halloween seemed like a month and a half ago, December 1st and December 10th will come upon us very, very quickly, as it always does this time of the year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Although this time, in comparison to last year, we had already had one big snowstorm, maybe two, and here we are with the 70s instead. So it's amazing how year to year those things can change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note because I was just talking with two of my friends who are long-range forecasters. I guess we're talking about climate and not politics all of a sudden here. But it does seem that we might actually get back into the 60s around here for Thursday and Friday of this week, and quite possibly see mild conditions for the rest of the month and maybe the first 2 weeks of December. So if you want to talk about that now, we can, or about that later. I'm fine with that, which way you want to go.
Well, we could talk about that now. I mean, it's not, here we are. We're selfish. We like the warm weather. We don't want the summer to go away. On the other hand, seasons have to change. And if we had 60 degrees all through the winter, there would be some people would be saying, "Wow, isn't that wonderful?" And other people like me would be saying, "That's a little scary." So we have to balance those two things.
Right. And if you want to be an environmentalist and someone who cares about climate change, and have 60s in December and not complain about it, move to Florida or Southern California.
Exactly, because when December comes, I expect cold weather. I expect snow in
Right.
Chicago.
Right.
I know you do too, Rick. I like snow. I know you like it.
Oh yeah, I don't mind it.
Yeah. Well, I know you ski on it as well, cross country ski, I've done that exactly once. But
Really?
really,
Oh my God, you got to get into it. Yeah.
I haven't cross country
but
skied since high
talk
school either. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a great exercise. But let's talk about some of the stuff that I sent you in my weekly weather update yesterday.
Sure.
And you can share this with your listeners or viewers on Facebook. By any, you could strip that stuff from the PowerPoint and post it. I don't mind. It's all government material. But you look at the areas that have had snow so far this year: northern Wisconsin, upper peninsula Michigan, much of Minnesota, northwest Iowa. I mean, they got so far anywhere between a foot and a foot and a half. I mean, they are way above normal snowfall, and they had snow on the ground as of till yesterday. And then another massive system blew through the Pacific Northwest and into the Rocky Mountains. People are skiing in Colorado. They're skiing in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. They're skiing in places like Deer Valley in Utah, maybe not yet up in the Pacific Northwest. Their season kind of starts a little bit later. But there's been another early outbreak of cold weather and snow across the Rocky Mountains and the Northern Plains. We're beginning to see more and more of these. And that's good for the ski season because they have really been hurt by some late starts to their season. I think it was a couple of years ago. There was no snow anywhere in parts of Colorado right through Thanksgiving weekend. And in a year where, resorts have really had to scale back, what type of services and amenities they provide to the guests, particularly during the summertime with the pandemic, the fact that they're getting an early jump on the ski season really helps. And I got a feeling that if you're skiing during the pandemic, you're probably not too concerned about spreading the virus because everybody's wearing some sort of goggles or mask on their face. And if there's one way that you can probably wear a mask and not feel bad about it, it's during the wintertime and during ski season. It actually keeps your mouth and your face a little bit warmer than normal, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And you're right. I was looking at those maps that you sent us. That's kind of surprising that there was that much snow up there because we've been so warm here. So is there a particular demarcation between those areas and us?
Yeah, I think if you draw a line for around, say, Omaha to about Minneapolis to just north of Green Bay, there's easily about 10 to 12 inches of snow that have fallen so far. And it was interesting because the other day I was doing one of my classes, through Zoom and basically moved everything online by now. And here we are talking about 70-degree weather here in Illinois. This was on Tuesday where we had that line of severe weather come through. Mm-hmm. And one of my students has already gone back home, A, because he caught the virus, and B, he didn't feel like staying in a dormitory on campus with other sick kids. He's up in Minneapolis. He's like, Mr. DeMaio, it's snowing out right now up here in Minneapolis. So I'd appreciate if you keep the glee about the 70-degree weather a little bit lower on the needle there. And sure enough, he was, this is what's happening now. I mean, I have students now spread out over the Midwest because either A, kids never came back to campus, or schools are just calling it quits early and saying, okay, that's it, we're done with the sudden increase in the positivity rate over the last couple of weeks.
Actually, that's a good point you bring up. How is that affecting your teaching? I know that you mentioned earlier to me this week that you were taking one of your courses that you were going to meet, and you said, no, we're doing it online. So I imagine a lot of that is happening.
Yeah, and that's Lewis University. They went from 4 to 7 to 9 to 14.5, and just last week they went up to 17.5%. And I just told my students, I go, most likely I won't see you guys again for the rest of the semester. And part of it was because even though we were doing the labs and the homework and the quizzes through Zoom on Thursday, we were doing the face-to-face classes on Tuesday. But as the semester went on, I had literally 3 to 5 kids per class of 25 kids either test positive or had to quarantine or had to go home. And here they are, trying to follow along while I'm doing a recorded session. And it just wasn't, the logistics just weren't as good as if we were all in the same sort of, quote, room, which was, a Zoom session. And that's what we decided to do 2 weeks ago. I said, guys, this is just not fair to the students who are not there at that time, nor are they as attentive to a recording as opposed to something that's done live, where they can interact and ask questions. And I said, let's just do, the rest of the semester, basically online. And after conferring with the department chair and also the dean, they said, that's fine, do what you need to do. And at the same time, we're talking about someone like me who's 57 years old and 5 years ago had pneumonia, was in the hospital for 3 days. I certainly don't want to get sick. A, I don't want to feel like crap. B, I want to be able to teach these kids. So what would happen now if instructors are getting sick? Who's going to take their place, and who's going to be able to do the work that's necessary to make sure these kids are able to get through the semester? So when you keep hearing, some of these idiots on right-wing radio, the answer was, say things like, you need to send the kids back to school, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, really? Do you realize that why we're doing this is not just because of them, but it's because of us, and we want to make sure that older faculty members don't get sick, and we can make sure these kids get the value for at least 99.9% of their dollar, and not say, well, we'll do the last 3 weeks on some sort of remote platform where the teacher isn't even involved. So there's so much more involved with e-learning and trying to get everybody the coursework that they demand at this point.
And I get it. I mean, I understand.
Oh yeah, crop like that.
But I understand why you would want to be safe and careful about that. Very quickly, I'm looking at your drought monitor. It doesn't look like a lot. It doesn't look like a lot has changed in the last few weeks.
No, no, it hasn't, Mike and Peg. And if you think about the warmth that we got, it was either A, helped out by the recent drought that we've had here, meaning that the ground was warm, or B, you look at the area where that air came from, it came from the desert Southwest. So all of that warming, which was either enhanced by downslope warming, or it came from an area in the United States that's basically bone dry. I mean, it was a combination of those two things that got you warm during the day. But what got us warm overnight was the flow of air off the Gulf of Mexico. So it's interesting to point out that there's two different ways we can get warm. We can get warm during the day when you bring in that dry southwest flow, which was occurring for the first 3 or 4 days. But once we got into Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, the overnight low temperatures didn't drop off because we were actually able to increase the dew points, and that was straight out of the Gulf of Mexico. So if you have two different ways that you can get warm, a large body of water or a large area of literally drought-ridden ground, we have both of those to the south and southwest of us, and that's one of the reasons why some parts of the Midwest are still running 12 to 15 degrees above normal for the month.
And and looking at that drought, basically, with it looks like the Northeast has improved a tiny bit, but basically it's like the Mississippi River is the dividing line once again. Everything west is just not getting rain, and the east and the southeast especially, they're doing fine.
Yeah, and you got to remember that, we still have fairly wet April and May and early June, so that drought monitor is based on how much rain you've had pretty much over the last 6 to 9 months. But they never really got into that during the summertime or during the springtime, over the Rocky Mountains and the desert Southwest. So unless things change during the wintertime, and I don't really see them changing much, we're gonna have the same amount of dryness through December, through January, through February, and if you get into March and April and you're at this level, look out for what could be a repeat maybe of 1988 and 2012, and that's how droughts start. Matter of fact, I just did in my severe and unusual weather class a week on a weekly module was on heat waves and droughts. And every large-scale drought is always a multi-season event. It either starts the season before and gets worse during that season, or is a combination of a couple of years of just low precipitation. So droughts just don't happen in one year. They're multi-year events. And if you look at the overall weather pattern that we're heading into, it still does not bode well for large amounts of precipitation, either in California or anywhere west of the Mississippi at this point, Mike and Peg.
Yikes. That's really not good. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I was done on that point because the overall pattern is a non-El Nino event. It's more of a La Nina event. And it's funny because the information that I was going back and forth is a friend of mine who's now over in Spain, Barcelona, Spain. He's the head meteorologist now for DHL, which is all transportation and logistics. And he's a really good long-range forecast. He generally goes out about 3 to 4 weeks, and his forecast is basically one of above normal temperatures through the second 2 weeks of November and the first 2 weeks of December. After that, that's kind of hard to figure out what's going to happen. But it seems like that the pattern we're in right now seems to be the pattern that we're going to stay in. And if this continues to go maybe another 2 weeks, is there a chance of something developing in the Gulf of Mexico that could maybe impact the northern Gulf or maybe the southern tip of Florida, which we just saw with Hurricane Ada? We're still not done with hurricanes, as you can see with Hurricane Iota currently moving through the southern Caribbean at this point.
Which is the 30th named storm, and
that's crazy.
That's we're going to have to go to a different alphabet after this too, because
what happens if we run out?
Oh, I don't know, Peg. I don't know, but it's funny that the letter I is Iota, and we use that name, that word every once in a while when someone says, you know what, Rick, I've been listening to you for the last 10 minutes and you have not made one iota of sense, which means, something small and something little. And here is Iota, and it's not a little storm. I mean, if you look back at Ada, that thing literally went all the way from just north of Venezuela, got down as far south as 12.5 degrees north latitude, went into Nicaragua and Honduras, which unfortunately is where Iota is going to go, which this could be devastating once again because it's the same type of setup, slow-moving hurricane that once you get that far south, there's not much in the way of steering currents. This could produce, again, 10 to 15 inches of rain. Now, fortunately, Ada did not produce the rain that we were thinking was going to get, so they only got 10 or 15 inches. Okay, they didn't get the 20 or 25, which would have been catastrophic, similar to what happened with Hurricane Mitch. But now you have another 10 to 15 inches coming on top of 10 to 15 inches that fell just last week. So could Iota be the one that could be devastating? In other words, again, a two-pronged event. And when you look at this, again, this is what the Paris Climate Accord helps small countries like Nicaragua and Honduras, is to have people from other countries like the United States and help them build up an infrastructure that is both mitigating and is adaptive to a changing climate that overall reduces their vulnerability. So when I keep hearing people say we need to pull out of that because we need to make America first again, since when did making America first again? I'm hope that we never have to use that term again. Make America first again mean that we don't help other countries. I thought that's what like the letters CARE stood for. Remember you used to see those commercials all the time when you were a kid watching cartoons on a Sunday morning? Or like when you were a kid, you donated to UNICEF. Does that mean in certain parts of the United States we don't care about UNICEF anymore? And we don't care about CARE anymore? We don't care about the UN? Last I checked, that wasn't on the United States list of being a great country. So again, when you see some of these developing countries have to go through some of this massive flooding, I just hope that it tugs a little bit at the heartstrings of people who turned their backs on these countries for the last 4 years.
I totally get it. All right, let's get a forecast for the next few days.
All right, well, for the next few hours, the cold front is passing through. I don't know about you, but I was up at 5:30 this morning enjoying temperatures in the mid-50s. So the mid-50s are now over Indiana and Ohio. I think it's 40 degrees currently with mid-30s just out to the west of us. So we've kind of reached our high. I don't think we're going to see anything in the way of any snow flurries or snow showers today, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of wind-blown wet flakes move through. Otherwise, we won't see any sun until tomorrow. But again, Mike and Peg, this is typical November stuff for us. So we got a 976 millibar low moving through the Great Lakes. It's to the north of us, so we're on the bottom part of it. So windy, cool today, sunshine tomorrow, high of about 40 to 45, and it definitely looks like temperatures probably much cooler during the day on Tuesday as that next little cool front comes through. So sunny tomorrow, mid to upper 40s, sunny on Tuesday, low 40s, back up to 50 on Wednesday. But just as quickly as we got cold, we warmed right back up, low to mid 60s on Thursday, maybe even low to mid 60s on Friday, and then somewhat near normal weather for Saturday and Sunday of next week. But I guarantee you nothing in the way of any snow and nothing in the way of any Arctic cold coming at us for probably the next 3 to 4 weeks at this point.
That will be interesting.
Do I hear another golf game?
Possibly. That's what
You know
I'm
what?
thinking.
I think the only way to play golf now, Peg, is to break into a golf course that's closed for the wintertime. But you never know.
You never know. No, there's some that stay open, so we'll see what happens. Rick, thank you so much. You have a great Sunday, and we will talk to you next week.
Take care, Mike and Peg. Be well.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care.
And that kind of does it for us. I want to thank everybody who was on the show today. The great Allan Armitage, and don't forget to get a copy of his book, Herbaceous Perennial Plants, 4th edition. If you use the code MIKE, M-I-K-E, you will get free shipping, so we'll let him know about that. Also, Bob Dolgan and Stephanie Beilke, thank you. Thanks to Kayla. Thanks to Rick DeMaio. Thanks to Kathleen. Have we missed anybody, Peggy?
Legata and Basil.
Legata and Basil. Okay. Until next time, go green or
Go home.
Stadler?
What?
Is that it?
Yes, it's over. How'd you like it?
I don't know. I slept through the whole thing.
Well, you didn't miss much.